Hello, and this is another video. We are Off-Road Solutions. We're going to talk about repinning an engine wire harness on a 3.4 5EZ. This is intended for swap applications, engine conversion applications. It's a common thing here, but when using a donor wire harness along with our adapter wire harness, which means you're using the used donor wiring, it's often difficult to get a manual trans computer on some of the older auto trans models, and a manual trans computer is a popular application. We did devise a time back a way to make this happen. 95 to 97 auto trans 5EZ engines use ECU or computer connectors that look like this shape. The manual trans versions in those days were a 2-pin, completely different connector, which actually uses somewhat different terminals. Those auto trans will actually plug into a roughly 98 application manual trans computer. However, several of the wires are in the wrong position, so they can plug in, but they just don't work. So this video is going to detail how we can actually move the proper wires to the proper place to allow the use of a 98 manual computer onto an older 95 to 97 3.4 5EZ auto trans engine harness. So if you have an application as your donor that's 95 to 97 auto, and you're wanting to use that in a manual trans vehicle, and you want the benefits of a manual trans computer, primarily no engine light or codes due to the absence of the auto trans, this is the simplest way to make that happen and reuse that older engine harness. We will say that you want to make sure the engine harness itself is intact and it's in good condition before going through the trouble of making this repin and purchasing a computer to match the repin. This document here is going to be used to do this. This is a document that we would be sending a customer if they were in the application range needing to do this. So if they have a 95 to 97 4Runner Tacoma or even T100 engine wire harness and they're going to a manual, they're wanting to purchase the right computer to make it happen, this instruction sheet would be sent to them electronically. It can be printed. We do recommend printing it on 2 separate pages like this so you can see the whole thing at one time. And this is going to detail how to walk through and move the wires basically from one position to the proper position. Over here you see a column for 97. This is 98. This simply means that this is the old original setup. This is how you're going to find the harness, and this is where we're moving and changing things too. We have connector pictures here to illustrate where these go. It's important to realize that these connector pictures do depict the connector from the face, which is going to be opposite the wire entry. So as you're looking at it like this, the wires would be going out the back. They all have a lock tab on top like this, and that's going to be the top of the connector. So this connector here would match this one on top. You're going to be looking at it from the face, opposite the wires, and that's how these illustrations are drawn. In order to do this procedure, the first step you're going to do is you're going to take a pick. We call this the locking bar. It's just a strip of plastic along the bottom that actually will internally be a secondary lock to all the terminals in their positions. And then one by one, we're going to be pulling these wires out by taking a pick. Inside, above the terminal, there's a small lock that's in there. You're going to have to push the lock away from the terminal gently. After pushing away, you would pull the wire out the back. You're going to move it from one place to the other. When you're done with the entire procedure, you will push the locking bar back into place. But again, the first thing you want to do is take this locking bar and pull it up on each connector. And there's always going to be 3 ECU connectors for these applications that'll look just like this. You can see that locking bar just barely pops up. It'll pop into place just above the line, the flush of the connector housing there. And when it kind of pops up into place, you know it's where it needs to be. You do not want to attempt to take this all the way out. You just want to leave it a little ways up, just like this. One other thing to note is you will see on these instructions that wire colors are often multiple choice. Like, for example, we have brown yellow here or brown black, and that's because this sheet covers a range of ECU applications, and across the different model range there is sometimes a variance in color. The most important thing is the actual pin position from one to the other. However, if you don't see the wire color in this position matching what we have written on the sheet, you're very welcome to call or email Off-Road Solutions, and we'd be glad to verify. Maybe it's a color that we haven't come across and haven't put on here. It could indicate you have the wrong pin, so do be careful of that. So to move these wires around, some of them are actually going from one computer connector to another and so forth. So one of the first steps we're going to do is get this tape off these ECU leads here. And we need to get back down and past the junction a bit so that we can move a wire from one to the other cleanly. Our first wire to move here is on E9, which is our larger one. Might actually be a good idea if you took a Sharpie and just labeled them. E9, E10, ooh, E11. Going back to E9, the largest one. This harness is a 97, so over here we have E9 number 25. We're looking for a brown and yellow wire or a brown black wire. We're going to move it to number 16. So here we are looking at number 25 there in that cavity, holding this the same way. It's going to be the second wire in right here. Come around to the back. That is a brown yellow wire. So I'll go ahead and grab a hold of that wire there. And just hang on to it for now. And number 25 here, we're going to end up moving this wire from 25 up to 16, so just above it. Now you'll notice that the wire above it, there's actually something in that place. So the best thing to do, and likely that wire needs to go to a different place. So actually the smart thing to do might be first, before moving number 25 out, look to see, and since there's something in 16, whoops. Go ahead and remove the wire out of 16. This style pick normally works pretty good as a standard for us. This is actually an electrical terminal pick, which sometimes works better. So we're going to get right inside on top of that terminal, and there's a plastic tab or locking tab. You just want to kind of push into it and lift it up away from the terminal, and just gently, after lifting, before putting tension on the wire, make sure the terminal is lifted out of all the way out of the way. Once you've done that, you can gently pull on the wire and it will come out. What I want to do here is take some tape and label the wire that came out where it came from. We're going to call that E9 number 16. We'll be getting to that wire probably a few steps later. So for now, just keep it labeled so we keep track of it. Now we're going to go back to the first step. We're going to take this brown wire with the yellow stripe, and that's what it means when we say brown/yellow, brown with the yellow stripe, in number 25. And we're going to move, and this is a pretty good shot. You can see the tab right on top of the gold-plated terminal. Push the tab up and then pull on the wire gently. And so number 25 brown yellow is going to move to E9 number 16. Again, that's this position right here. Push the wire in the back. You'll push the wire in until you hear an audible click. You can feel it, you can hear it, and gently just do a pull test on that wire to be sure it's firmly in place. That one is. So probably wouldn't be a bad idea just to put a check mark next to that step, whatever you need to do to keep track. Next we're going to go to E9 number 26, so it's right here next to it, and that is supposed to be a black wire with the white stripe. That is there. I'm going to go ahead and take a look though at number 15 where it belongs, and we have a wire in that position already too. So we're going to take this red white wire that's already in that position, number 15. Lift the tab, gently pull it out the back, and then we're going to label that wire also. E9 number 15. Now we can take back to this step, E9 number 26, which is right here. It's black and white wire. lift the locking tab, slide the wire out the back, and that one's going to go up to number 15. Quick pull test. And I just double check, make sure that's in the right place. And we'll put a check mark on our sheet here. Okay, so this number 1 brown wire is going to be going to number 28. Take a quick peek at number 28. And on this sheet you'll see that some of these holes have dots or X's. Just the way Toyota illustrated these things, and that's what we happen to have on this sheet. But obviously they're going to be going from left to right, top to bottom, so I have 26 here. Number 28 I'm looking for has an X, so you can either write your numbers in there or just do the counting. That's going to be 28, this second one here, because that'll be 27. There's actually nothing in that place, so this is a simple wire. Simply take E9 number 1, brown wire, lift the tab, gently pull the wire out. Sometimes they do this. This is where you really need to be patient, because if you start messing up a plastic locking tab inside the housing, it's very hard to get the wire out, and you might even trash the whole connector housing or have to splice wires. It's not much fun. So we're going to move that down to number 28. Pull test. Solid. We're going to check that off. Feel a little bit like Mr. Rogers here. This next wire here, in some cases, may or may not be in there to deal with at all. You may be able to skip that step. It says 4x4 only, so that wire would only be there if this harness happened to be a 4-wheel drive harness, which this one is, and it is a blue-red like the instructions say. Coming down the list on that note, you're going to find also that this is EGR only on some of these. For sure, every 4Runner will not have EGR, so these that say EGR only, you won't even find these wires. You should find an open cavity where it says EGR only, and again, if it says 4x4 only, if the harness did come from some sort of 2-wheel drive, you wouldn't have anything there. So we have blue and red wire starting out in position number 29, which will be right next to what we just did, right here. And that's going to be going to number 2, and we have no wires in number 2 right now, so we can just simply move this one. Whoops, I'm going to move to the slightly easier pick here. That one's in number 2. Check that off. Okay, on this next one, we're actually taking it from one connector to another, and it can get a little more tricky there. So E9 number 16, we know that we already took the wire that was originally in 16, so I'm going to find this wire I took out of there, this pink or pink with a green stripe. Ours actually happens to be pink with a blue stripe. We did know that was in the position. This is a case where you could call Off-Road Solutions and check. We know that this one's okay, so we're going to move forward. So this is going from E9, which is this large one, over to E11, which is our smallest one. And this can get a bit tricky because these are actually different wire lengths. So we're fortunate in this case this thing's actually longer, and so it's not a problem. But let's see if there's already something in that position. It's E11, number 11, which is this guy right down here, and that's an empty cavity. So for now it's pretty easy just to take and move that over. It would be good before putting in there to do our best here to untangle this as best as possible so it can come right off the bottom stem of that connector wire bundle there, so that we don't have things stuck together and not splitting like they should. It's probably not a bad idea to put a few wraps on that to take up the extra length. You could put some shapes in it, whatever you want to do there. So we're going to go to E11, number 11, which will be right here. And these do have to be turned. There's a right side up and an upside down. Make sure you got them turned the right way, but you won't be able to put it in there if you have it wrong. So I got E11, number 11. That's my pink wire. Okay. Next one's going to be the same thing. It's actually this number 15 wire that we took out on our second step. So now that one needs to go to E11 number 10, and there is no wire there to start with, so it's the exact same thing we just did. Pull this wire out. It's a bit longer, so we'll wrap it around here, so when you go back later to tape that up, it'll be a bit simpler to keep it clean and deal with. So that's going to go in position number 10, which is right here, and again we're counting backwards from 13, 12, 11, 10. So I got position 10 number there. So since we're taking this document starting on the 97 side going to the 98, we've actually completed our work coming out of E9. So now we're going to pick up connector number E10, which is our medium-sized connector here, and we're going to do the same things there. And a lot of these are going to go to other connectors. Even this first one's going to E9 number 30. So let's look at E9 number 30. 30 is going to be right here, and there is no wire there, so that's pretty easy. So we can take the wire out of E10 number 12, which is going to be a violet yellow. In our case, violet yellow. It matches the color on the sheet. Now this one here happens to be a short E10, happens to be a shorter connector. Sometimes down in the Toyota OEM wire harness you can find where they have bunched some wires up like this one here and some slack, but we don't have that slack on this one here. So there's a few things we could do. We could actually take and just try to twist up these E10 wires, and in the end it'll be shorter. We can also take and in the end we can actually add some length to this. So in my opinion, in my experience, it's probably going to be best to actually go ahead and pin this wire in place now, and then in the end any shorter wires we may take and lengthen them at that point according to the length. For the purpose of this video, we're going to just pin it in there now, and we will add some length later. You could conceivably add some length now, but in the end you do not want a wire like this that's going to be extra short with everything longer. So anytime you tug on this connector, you're tugging on one wire. That's recipe for trouble. Okay, so if I look at this E10 number 21, we've already put a wire there. It was originally an empty cavity, so we're skipping that step because we're not an EGR, because this came from a 400. This is the most complicated step right here. It says E10 number 11. So that's going to be right here. That's going to be a blue or a white wire. In our case, it's blue. So you can see the destination is E10 number 6, just right up above it. However, this is one where the text here says leave number 6 in place, which is a pink wire, which is the case here. So we want to actually leave number 6 pink in place. We want to leave that wire intact, meaning we don't cut any of it out of the circuit. We want a splice or T, which just basically means a 3-way splice. The blue or white wire, in our case it's a blue wire, into number 6 pink. So we're basically going to take this blue wire out of number 6. And instead of replacing the pink, we're actually going to integrate it into the pink wire. So we actually want to make a splice. While leaving the pink wire circuit intact, we're just going to add the blue wire to it basically. So this will actually be a splice connection here. You want to make that at a strategic or smart place in the wire harness. So we're going to take and we're going to hold that wire terminal right at the length we believe this pink is, so we don't end up with a wire that's too short, so one of the others not too short. Hold them together firmly. I'm actually going to just make a full cut. There's different ways to do this. You could just strip back the insulation on the pink and solder the blue into it. We use non-insulated butt connectors with glued heat shrink, so they're pretty solid splice connections, which are simple. Okay, so these here We like to use the smallest connector that we can get the wires into safely to keep everything as small as possible. These do require kind of it's best done with a wide crimper like this if you're going to use a butt connector and not a cheap narrow crimper. So crimp those together nicely, and then I'll put a piece of one size larger heat shrink over that. We'll put a piece of small heat shrink, normal size for this connection, over the other end of the connection. We'll splice them together. We'll do a quick pull test to make sure all 3 wires are firmly in there. Okay, slide the heat shrink nice and even over there. This would be satisfactory. We'd like to go ahead and wrap an extra piece of tape around this end here where we have 2 wires so that they're not, sometimes these can be forcibly pulled apart in a wire harness and split the heat shrink, and then that starts coming apart and it's just a bad connection. In order to make this step successful, you would have had to put the right size smaller heat shrink on one end here with the single wire and slide this oversized piece of heat shrink down the other so it's there and ready to go. And we'll just kind of cover the butt connector along with this taped there. So it's a couple steps to reassure that this multi-wire splice is going to remain solid under here. So that'll complete this step here where we've basically taken the blue wire from E10 number 11 and actually integrated it with the pink wire that was already in E10 number 6. And that's what you'll end up with. Then we're going to move on to the wires in E11 and do the same thing there. The last section on this set of instructions here deals with forerunner only. So although it says 97, as we keep saying, this is written for 95 through 97, and forerunners in this generation started in 96. So this would truly mean 96 and 97 forerunner only. If you're dealing with Tacoma or Tundra wiring, you can skip this step altogether. So this actually deals with II1, which is nearby, but actually on this group of connectors right here that used to go to the body of the donor. And so it's referring to II1 number 1, which is this position here. As stated, it's a black wire with a white stripe. Basically, we need to move that from number 1 to number 6, which is straight below it. Number 6 actually has a black wire occupying it, and these actually have a tab below to pull them. So this wire that was originally in number 6, this solid black wire, is actually no longer going to be used. So when we're done, we'll cut it or leave it, but either way you need to basically tape this or heat shrink this, or cut and heat shrink so that this wire can no longer contact anything in any strange way, and basically deleting that wire. So now that we have that space open, we're going to start at I1 number 6 black and white wire. The locking bar is actually on the bottom of these terminals. And move it down to position number 6. So that's firmly in position. Okay, so we do need to deal with this wire. Probably the best thing to do is you can heat shrink it or you can cut it. Put a piece of heat shrink on it like so. This is a super long piece, but caps off the end of the wire. So that shorts cannot happen in any strange way. Kind of overdoing it in this case, but it's better to do that. Okay, now you'll see that we had pulled some other wires before, but they've all been put back into their positions, so we don't have any other extra loose wires, and you shouldn't when you're done with this process. We do need to lengthen this one wire that went up here. You can see it's shorter than the rest, so we do need to fix that so we don't have a short wire there. One thing that we advise doing at the end of this process is to actually go down the list on the 1998 column, which is your new goal, and make sure that your wire colors match the positions. That's just sort of a way to double check your wiring at the end. Anything you would have moved would fall into this category here, and make sure again that the 98 wire is indicated, that this wire color is in that position. For example, black white would be an E9 number 15. Just go down the list, check yourself. Once you've checked each connector, I do recommend taking the locking bars and just clicking them, pushing them back into place on each connector housing. And then in addition to lengthening this single wire here, we are also going to want to kind of twist these up nicely and rewrap them with electrical tape and get this sheath back into place where it belongs, and retape this one here. And then at that point your modification for the 98 computer will be done. Okay, so this is that violet yellow wire that we moved over to this larger housing, and it ended up being too short. This is probably a common way that most installers would want to do this. It requires 2 splices, but it doesn't require special terminals or crimpers to just basically make 2 cuts a little ways away from each other. Add in the necessary length of wire, so this will lay in here real nicely and be the same length as everything else, so you don't end up with a short wire. One thing to note here is on our instruction set, right here is the computer ECU applications that will be required at this point. Any of these are all meant to be a manual transmission. So any of these applications will work. If it's anything outside this list, it will not work. It will either not plug in, or it'll plug in and it won't work. So it must follow this list. Do keep in mind that you can no longer use the 95 through 97 auto trans ECU that came with this wire harness because of this pinout is done. That ECU, although it would still plug in, would not work properly. So again, you have to come from this list. In rare instances, sometimes people can't find a manual computer that falls in this application list. In that case, you could conceivably use an auto trans computer from this application list, knowing that your harness is ready to go for a manual counterpart. So for example, you could use a 98 4Runner auto trans computer instead of manual. Because you can pick them up cheap, you could use that as a solution because you've done your pinout and now you want it to work on that pinout. So instead of changing it back and using the old computer because you can't find a manual, you could go get a cheap auto and then at some point just swap it out for manual. But again, the computer that you're using has to fall within this application list. One more thing to note on the 95 to 96 T100, 95 Tacoma, there's some EGR components that actually aren't in the engine wiring that this ECU list is going to be looking for. So to get the evap system to work right, to get the engine light off, ORS does actually have a supplement that can be built and sent to you to add to these to basically come up with those circuits to the appropriate valves and sensors in the evap system. Thank you for watching.